Clint Eastwood, the man who had faced countless dangers and heart-pounding chases on screen, was no stranger to life-and-death moments in movies. But in real life, he had never felt as helpless as he did now. His most loyal companion, Rusty, had vanished without a trace. Rusty wasn't just a dog. He was a quiet but deeply meaningful presence in Clint's life. Years ago, on a freezing winter afternoon, Clint was heading home from a long walk along the Carmel shoreline when he heard a faint whimper coming from a small alley. As he approached, he found a trembling little puppy, its reddish-brown fur caked in mud, its deep blue eyes filled with fear. It was far too small to survive alone in the harsh cold. Clint knelt down and gently picked it up. The puppy didn't struggle, it just curled up in his arms, seeking warmth. "You won't have to wander anymore," Clint murmured as he softly stroked its head. When they got home, Clint quickly dried the little pup, wrapped it in a soft towel, and placed it near the fireplace. As if sensing it had finally found a safe place, Rusty stretched out, nestled into Clint's lap, and fell asleep. From that moment on, Rusty wasn't just a dog, he was family. As time passed, Rusty grew into a strong, agile, and incredibly smart dog. To Clint, he was more than a pet. He was a true friend, one who would never betray, never judge, and always be by his side no matter what. Every morning they had an unbreakable ritual, a walk along Carmel Beach at sunrise. As the first rays of sunlight reflected off the endless blue waves, the ocean whispered against the soft sand, leaving shimmering trails behind. Rusty would always dash ahead, his paws dancing across the wet sand, occasionally turning back to look at Clint with eager eyes. Clint would chuckle, slowing his steps to savor the peaceful moment. He often picked up a piece of driftwood and threw it into the distance. Rusty would bolt after it with incredible speed, leaping to catch it before proudly trotting back, tail wagging nonstop. During quiet afternoons, Clint liked to sit on his porch, a steaming cup of coffee in hand, while Rusty curled up at his feet. Every so often, Rusty would lift his head, watching Clint's every little movement with keen eyes. Clint would smile, reach down, and run his fingers through the once matted fur, now sleek and glossy with the years. To Rusty, Clint wasn't a legendary movie star, he was simply his best friend. On cold winter nights, when the sea wind howled through the cracks in the door, Rusty would snuggle into Clint's lap by the fireplace. They spent countless nights like that, wrapped in the silent warmth of a friendship that needed no words, just presence. Rusty wasn't just there for the easy days. He was Clint's rock in the toughest moments. Whenever Clint felt the weight of work or the struggles of life pressing down on him, Rusty was always there, lying quietly by his side, resting his head on Clint's leg as if to say, "No matter what happens, I'm here." One time, Clint had to be away for several weeks filming in another location. When he finally returned, he found Rusty sitting by the door, eyes gleaming yet tinged with sadness. But the moment Clint stepped inside, Rusty sprang forward, barking excitedly as he buried himself in his old friend's embrace. Clint chuckled and hugged Rusty tightly. The dog licked his hand gently, then wagged its tail and ran around in circles, as if trying to tell Clint about the long days it had been waiting. Life felt complete with Rusty by his side. No matter where he went or what he did, as long as Rusty was there, Clint always felt at ease. Once, at a big Hollywood event, when asked about the most important thing in his life, Clint simply smiled and said, "When I come home, Rusty will be the first one to greet me. And that's all I need." But everything changed that morning. Like always, Clint opened the kennel door, letting Rusty out into the yard to breathe in the fresh air. The ocean breeze carried the scent of salt and the distant sound of waves crashing against the shore. Rusty dashed out, bounding across the grass, ears perked, tail wagging in familiar joy. But when breakfast time came, something strange happened. Rusty didn't come back. Clint searched everywhere, around the ranch, down the path leading to the beach, through the narrow alleys of town. Everyone knew Clint and Rusty, from the old fishermen to the cafe owners who saw them every morning. When they heard the news, they jumped in to help, putting up flyers and calling out Rusty's name across the small streets of Carmel by the sea. But as the days passed, there was still no sign of the little dog. Clint sat silently on the porch steps, staring out at the empty yard. The evening sky was painted in brilliant shades of orange, but to him, everything seemed dull. The wind still rustled through the trees, the waves still rolled onto the shore, but something was missing, Rusty. The house had never felt so quiet. Everything was still in its place. Rusty's food bowl sat neatly in the kitchen, his little bed remained beside the fireplace. Yet his absence left a void that nothing could fill. Each morning, Clint still walked out to the yard, waiting for the familiar sounds. The quick tapping of Rusty's paws on the wooden floor, the sharp bark whenever he spotted a mischievous squirrel on the fence. But now there was only the whisper of the wind through the leaves, carrying a loneliness that clenched at Clint's heart. He missed every moment with Rusty, the way he curled up at his feet each night, his eyes half closed as Clint stroked his fur. He missed watching him race across the beach, leaving tiny footprints in the sand, always glancing back to make sure Clint was right behind him. But now those footprints were gone. At night, Clint still found himself glancing at the corner where Rusty used to sleep. But all that was left was emptiness. He couldn't even remember the last time he had cried, but tonight, his eyes stung with the thought of Rusty, alone, lost in some unfamiliar place, afraid and cold. Clint held on to hope that Rusty was safe somewhere and that one day he would come back, as if nothing had ever happened. But would fate let them reunite? As time passed, Clint's worry only grew. Every morning he hoped for a phone call, some news, anything, but all he got was silence. The townspeople kept searching, and Clint refused to give up. He drove along winding forest roads, walked the beaches Rusty had loved, stopped by every animal shelter, desperately hoping for a lead. But all he ever got were sympathetic shakes of the head. Every night, the silence of the house weighed heavier on him. Rusty's small bed remained by the fireplace, untouched but without its warmth. Clint sat alone in his old wooden chair, gazing out at the yard where Rusty had once waited for him to come home. Now there was only emptiness and a longing that refused to fade. Even so, Clint never lost hope. He believed that somewhere out there, Rusty was still trying to find his way home. And until that day came, Clint would never stop searching. During the time they were apart, Rusty had found shelter in a new home, the home of Mrs. Helen, a kind-hearted woman who lived alone in a small house on the edge of town. She had spotted Rusty wandering along the narrow garden path, exhausted and hungry. Sensing that he needed help, she immediately gave him a warm bowl of water and some food. Rusty was hesitant at first, but when he realized that Mrs. Helen meant no harm, he gradually let his guard down. In the days that followed, Rusty became her quiet companion on peaceful mornings. He would sit by her feet as she tended to her garden, his gaze distant, as if remembering a place far away. Yet he also seemed to find a sense of calm in this new space. Mrs. Helen cared for him like an old friend, always speaking to him gently and offering soft pats, even though Rusty never responded with words. It wasn't home, but the time he spent with her gave him warmth and comfort, though deep inside, he was still waiting for the day he would see Clint again. One late afternoon, Mrs. Helen was sitting on her porch, sipping tea with her old radio playing the local news. The announcer's voice filled the quiet air, telling the heartwarming story of Clint Eastwood searching for his loyal dog, Rusty. She listened closely, and when the broadcaster described a reddish-brown dog with deep blue eyes, she froze. She looked down at Rusty, curled up at her feet, his eyes filled with that same distant sadness. Her heart pounded. "Rusty, is that you?" she whispered, gently stroking his head. She could hardly believe that the dog she had cared for all this time was the lost companion of a Hollywood legend. Without hesitation, she grabbed the flyer her neighbor had given her days ago and carefully read the bolded words, Lost Dog, Rusty, Australian Shepherd, reddish-brown fur, blue eyes. If found, please contact Clint Eastwood. She picked up the phone and dialed. Hello, is this Clint Eastwood? Yes? Clint's voice carried a mix of tension and hope. You're looking for Rusty, aren't you? She could hear the urgency in his voice as he replied, Yes. Have you seen him? He's here with me. He's safe, but I think he really misses you. Less than an hour later, Clint's pickup truck appeared on the dirt road leading to Mrs. Helen's house. Even before the engine fully stopped, Rusty sensed something in the air. He stood up, ears perked, eyes shining with a joy that couldn't be hidden. Still, as he prepared to run, he hesitated. He turned back to Mrs. Helen, looking at her one last time, as if trying to memorize the face of the woman who had cared for him with such kindness. He didn't know if he would ever see her again, but in that moment he felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Then, as Clint knelt down and opened his arms, Rusty could wait no longer. He bolted forward, leaping into Clint's embrace with pure, uncontainable joy. Mrs. Helen stood quietly, watching the emotional reunion. Clint looked up at her, his eyes filled with gratitude. I don't even know how to thank you, Mrs. Helen. She smiled kindly and said, Just knowing that you and Rusty are together again is thanks enough. Clint nodded, then looked down at Rusty, running his hand gently over his fur. Before leaving, Clint bought a box of homemade pastries from Mrs. Helen, a small token of gratitude. Rusty followed him to the truck, but before hopping in, he turned back one last time, gazing at her as if to say goodbye. It was only a brief moment, but it held so much meaning, a silent farewell to a newfound friend. As the truck rumbled down the road, Rusty curled up on the passenger seat beside Clint, his eyes slowly drifting shut in peaceful contentment. From that day forward, whenever Clint and Rusty took their morning walks along the beach, they always made an extra stop, a visit to the little house where a kind-hearted woman and her warm, home-baked pastries welcomed them like old friends. One evening, the three of them sat together on the porch. Rusty lay by Clint's feet, occasionally looking up at him with eyes full of happiness. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Clint stood up, giving Rusty a light pat on the head. Come on, buddy, let's go home. Rusty barked excitedly and leaped into the truck, his joy impossible to contain. Clint turned back and gave Mrs. Helen's hand a gentle squeeze. You know, he said with a soft smile, from now on, I won't just be coming here to look for a lost dog. I'll be coming back to visit a friend. Mrs. Helen's eyes shone warmly. This door will always be open for you. The truck rolled away, leaving behind a trail of paw prints in the dirt. Inside, Rusty rested his head on Clint's lap, his eyes slowly closing in peaceful slumber. The night no longer felt cold. The soft hum of crickets, the whisper of the wind through the fields, it all blended together into a quiet symphony, a melody that had been missing from Clint and Rusty's lives during their time apart. Clint let out a deep breath, feeling the warmth of Rusty beside him. Over the years, he had been through countless ups and downs, but nothing had ever felt like as much of a loss as when Rusty was gone. And now that he was back, Clint understood something. Some things in life can never be replaced. Some bonds can never be broken. Rusty shifted slightly, his body relaxing even more. Clint smiled, his expression softer than ever. He leaned back in his seat, looking up at the star-studded sky, letting time slow to a peaceful crawl. Tomorrow, they would walk those familiar trails again, listen to the waves crashing against the shore, and feel the salty breeze against their skin. But tonight, with Rusty by his side, everything was exactly as it should be.